Hey guys, I had an interesting question posed to me on my introductory vlog on the Victory Judge, and the person asked in not so many words, basically, is there a way that I could kind of, I think his point was that he liked the Victory Judge, and he wanted to know if there's a way that you can kind of gain experience or basically be able to ride a bike like this without having to buy a starter bike. And you know, it made me think a little bit. There are a few things that go through my mind there. First of all, that's a very, very different mindset than I had when I started. I was pretty scared when I started riding. I mean, I was, uncertain, and I was not, I was certainly not the best rider at all when I began riding. I'm still not, I'm still learning. And I started off on a 250. I started off on a Hyosung 250 that felt too big. And actually, the Hyosungs are larger than a lot of the other 250s. They're bigger than like a Honda Rebel, for example. But still, they're a lot smaller than the 800s and the 1400s and the 1200s and the 1800s. And that felt big to me. So to me, it's kind of a weird question, because I guess I look at it like I started out wanting the smallest thing I could possibly get, just so I could begin the process of learning. It's almost bizarre for me to think about starting off. I mean, I looked at, I remember very clearly when I was at the dealership, and I was kind of waiting around for, just paperwork or whatever on my Hyosung, and I was sitting on various bikes that were around, and they had a used bike. They had a million used bikes, but this particular one that I sat on was just seemed absolutely huge. And I remember swinging my leg over it and sitting on it, and I got it upright and everything, and I said, wow, this is just absolutely huge. And I thought, how could anybody ride this? I mean, how could you control it? And I looked at the side of it, and it said Suzuki Boulevard C50T. And of course, ironically, 3 or 4 weeks later, I ordered that bike. And when I got it, it just felt perfect. It just felt like it was like a glove. It was really, really nice. And but I don't think I would have started out on that bike. And I certainly would not start off on this bike. So, as I said to him, maybe some other people will offer some opinions. But these are my thoughts. Basically, a 250 has some advantages. So my Hyosung was 391 pounds, I think, and this is about 650. So, you got about 260 pounds there. That's, it's a little bit different when you're just starting out. You've got a weight difference. Now, depending upon how tall you are and how strong you are, you may be able to get enough leverage that it's not going to make that much difference to you. So weight is one factor. Another factor is obviously speed. The amount of torque produced by this engine is substantially more than a 250, or actually it's substantially more than most bikes in its class. And that translates into, if you're not familiar with it, if you're not used to the idea of riding a motorcycle, you kind of stand the chance of letting the bike get out of control, or there's just a lot of things that can go wrong. One of the keys for me for riding a motorcycle is clutch control, and I think that's really one of the keys for everybody. I mean, you can learn how to counter steer, and you can learn how to do slow speed maneuvers, but clutch control is everything. And clutch control on a 250cc bike is a little bit easier than on an 1800cc bike like this. And so what can happen, I mean, what I see is a situation where, let's say you're at an intersection and you want to turn right. Well, that turn is a very, that actually took me a couple of weeks to really get the feel for, because I just wasn't really used to the clutch. I wasn't really handling that very well. And I look at that and I say, if, on my 250, if I let the clutch out too quickly or it slips or anything, the bike's just going to stall and I'm just going to sit there and I'm going to be a little bit embarrassed. But on this bike, if you're not used to the clutch and you give it some throttle and you just let out the clutch, you will end up in the opposite lane in oncoming traffic. So again, there are a lot of reasons why people say kind of should start off on a smaller bike. That's one of them for me. So you got weight, you got the speed difference. Maneuverability, I think, tends to be a little bit better on a smaller bike. The feeling is more neutral. The handling is probably just a little bit better. Stopping, because of the weight of the bike, stopping is a little bit easier in most cases on a lighter bike than it is on a bike like this. Now, that's not to say, by the way, that this bike requires some sort of amazing skill to ride. If I can ride it, then then most people can, because I'm not a greatly skilled rider or anything at this point. And then the third thing also, is insurance cost. It's going to cost you more to insure a larger bike than it will to insure like a 250. And if you're starting out and you take the MSF class and you basically come away from that saying, this is not for me, and let's say you've already bought a bike like I did. I bought the bike before I took the class. Or let's say you take the class and you love it, and then you start riding, and a week later you don't fall in love with it. Motorcycle riding, just so you know, for me, motorcycle riding is something that it is so dangerous, really, really, really life and death dangerous, that unless you love it with all of your heart and all of your soul, unless you can't breathe, unless you're on a bike, then it's not worth it. It's really not worth it. It's just not worth the risk. You have to think about people outside of yourself. You got to think about your family. Your parents or your wife or your husband. There is a lot of risk that goes with motorcycles, and so you got to make sure you love it before you make a big investment. And a lot of the times 250s, most of the time you can actually buy them, especially used. You can buy them and then sell them a couple thousand miles later with really almost no loss. I mean, you could almost sell them for the exact same price. So it's just the way the market works. Mileage doesn't really mean that much on a bike, just from what I've seen. Maybe other people have different ideas, but I've just noticed that. And lastly, just getting back to the weight thing, it really is so much easier to maneuver a smaller, lighter bike. Now, this bike, the Victory Judge, is smaller than most cruisers of its same engine size. A lot of bikes that have an engine that's 106 cubic inches or over, even the Harleys that are like 103s, they're heavier bikes. And not only that, but especially in the case of Harleys, and I don't start with the flaming comments there, because I don't care. I'm not a Harley basher. I like a lot of different bikes, and if people love Harleys, that's great. I would never rule one out for myself. I just ride what I like to ride at that particular moment in time. So anyway, but a lot of Harleys are heavier, and they're just more top heavy, it seems. Now, again, that comes with a fairing and everything. That's part of the territory. Wow, that's a school bus Hummer. Interesting. So, that top heaviness, if you're not used to a bike that can really get you. If you get on it and you're struggling to pick it up from the kickstand, that bike is not for you, at least not yet. On the road, it's no big deal, but once you come to a stop sign, you need to be able to control that bike really, really well. And this bike being smaller than most, you know, if you're going to start with an 18, I mean, this is so hard, guys, because there's a plus and a minus here. The plus is that this bike is lighter than a lot of bikes that are in the 1800cc category. It's also faster than a lot of bikes in the 1800cc category, and that's the minus if you're just starting out. Like I said, you can easily just pop the clutch and end up in opposing traffic, and that's really not going to work out well for you. So me personally, I like the path that I took. I had a 250 for about a month. I had an 800 for about a little less than a year. Well, a lot of that was winter, so I'm not sure that really counts as riding time, but I put about 4,500 miles or 4,000 miles or something on the 800cc Suzuki Boulevard. And that just seemed right. That path felt right to me. And I'm not saying it's perfect for you, but for me, that really worked out well. You know, should you start off on an 1800cc? My opinion is really no. That's just my thought. And you know what? I'm going to make one more comment too, and maybe this won't be popular, but the reality is, if your thought process is that you want to skip the 250, and you want to skip the 800, and you want to skip a 1200, which, well, I skipped the 1200, but if you want to skip a starter bike and jump right to an 1800, then the more you want to do that, the more I say you shouldn't. Because you're, how do I want to put it? I'm not sure that you're looking at all of the safety aspects of motorcycling. If you really, I mean, I would never have considered an 1800cc. It just wouldn't have come into my mind to start off with. And if you're sitting there without having taken the MSF class, or without having a license, or without having ridden before, and you're just kind of just, you know, thinking, hey, I want to start off on a huge bike, then your thought process may not be exactly where it should be as far as motorcycling. Motorcycling, you know, it's not like you don't just like come out and you're Evel Knievel and you're just doing stunts everywhere. You have to be exceptionally safety conscious. And I'll tell you what, people think that motorcyclists, you know, are these big tough guys and girls and everything, but essentially, if you want to survive on a motorcycle, you have to put your ego in check. You just have to put it in check. You can't have an ego on a bike. It just doesn't work. You have to be safety conscious. You have to be willing to not act on road rage, because any car out there, you know, you get into a confrontation with a Mini, and you will not fare well if that driver snaps and decides to, you know, just give you a nudge. That's not going to go well for you. So anyway, so yeah, the mindset is important, and you got to start off with the mindset of just, you want to be safe. And for me, that means working your way up. I just don't think there are any shortcuts. The only thing you're really going to lose is time. It's just really start off with a used 250, jump up to an 800, or even a 1200, and then if you really want to, you know, maybe give it 6 months, a year, and then you can hop up to a you know, up to an 1800. That's just the way I did it, so I really can't advise anybody differently than the way I did it, because I know it worked for me. So those are my sort of randomized thoughts there, and I hope that helps anybody that might be considering that path. And hopefully you guys will ride safely and enjoy it. Talk to you later.